I was crowning on the shoulder of the highway, blood on my seat, breath ragged, while he lined up a putt on the 15th hole. If you think that's the worst part, it's not. The worst part came years later, when he called me crying, asking if our son even knew his name. And I told him the truth, he didn't. Because I made sure he never would. Hi. My name is Claire Walters. I'm a nurse. A mother. And once upon a time, I was a wife, married to a man who believed his tea time was more important than my delivery time. But before I get to the blood on the leather seat or the stranger with trembling hands who held my baby's head as it crowned, let me take you back to the beginning of that awful day. It was July. Sweltering. I was 39 weeks pregnant and had spent the morning folding tiny onesies and stocking the freezer with homemade meals, trying to be prepared. My bag was packed. My body was aching. But I was calm, ready. That was until the contractions started. I was alone in the kitchen when the first one hit. By the third, they were under 10 minutes apart. I called Mason, my husband, and told him, shakily, it's time. His reply? Babe, I just teed off. I've got 9 holes left. I'll be home in under 2 hours. Relax. First-time moms take forever. No. First-time moms don't take forever when the baby is descending like a freight train and the pressure in your pelvis feels like your spine is snapping. I told him I couldn't wait. That I was driving myself to the hospital. He laughed and said, drama queen, then told me to breathe and not do anything rash. But it was already too late. By the time I hit the freeway, the pain was unbearable. I was sweating. Moaning. I had one hand on the wheel and the other gripping the dashboard. That's when it happened. My water broke, exploded, really, all over the driver's seat. I panicked. Pulled over. And screamed. And here's where fate stepped in, because a retired EMT named Margaret just happened to be driving behind me. She saw my hazard lights, pulled over, and within seconds was in my car yelling, "Don't push yet." But I couldn't stop it. The baby was coming. On the side of I-95, under a boiling sun, with cars honking past us at 80 miles an hour, I delivered my son. My beautiful, 6-pound 10-ounce baby boy. Margaret cradled him in her arms. She was shaking. I was sobbing. And when Mason finally called, 45 minutes later, do you know what his first words were? Did you seriously have him without me? No apology. No panic. Just irritation that I'd done something without his permission. I told him not to come. That I was fine. That my son was fine. And that the man I had married was dead to me. The next day, I filed for full custody. I had video footage of the highway birth from Margaret's dashcam. I had texts from Mason ignoring my pain. I had nurses at the hospital who watched me sob through the night while Mason played the victim outside in the waiting room. The judge took one look at the evidence and granted me everything: sole custody, emergency support, and a permanent restraining order after Mason screamed in court that I'd staged it to make him look bad. Fast forward 7 years. Mason remarried. A woman named Elise. Sweet, infertile Elise. I know that because she messaged me, begging to meet the boy they could never have. Mason had told her he was alienated, forbidden, tragically cut off. She didn't know about the golf course. The dashcam. The court ruling. So I sent her the truth. And then came Mason's call. His voice cracked like a man on the edge. Does he know I'm his dad? I told him, no. He knows I'm his mom. That's enough. And I meant it. Because when you choose a putter over a newborn, don't be surprised when that child grows up thinking someone else is the hero. I don't think I'll ever forget the sound of Margaret's voice, commanding, calm, full of instinct and compassion. I'm retired, but muscle memory doesn't retire, she said as she tied off the umbilical cord with her shoelace. She had tears in her eyes too, and we were strangers. Strangers united by urgency and blood and birth. It was her dashcam footage that later saved me, not just in court, but emotionally. That tiny camera mounted on her windshield captured the most intimate, terrifying, empowering moment of my life. It caught everything. My face drenched in sweat, screaming for breath. Her hands catching my baby. His first cry echoing against speeding cars. It even caught the moment my phone buzzed with Mason's name flashing on the screen, ignored. I didn't have the energy to hear his excuses while I cradled the boy I'd brought into this world without him. By the time the ambulance arrived, Margaret had wrapped us in a blanket from her trunk. The EMTs called her a hero. She just winked and said, "No, honey. I just showed up when someone needed me." I would later learn that she'd lost her own daughter to a car accident years ago. She never talked about it again, but I think, in some strange way, helping me helped her heal too. At the hospital, Mason finally showed. Red-faced. Still in his golf attire. I watched him walk into my room with the swagger of someone who thought flowers and charm could undo blood and abandonment. He looked at the baby, paused, then said, "He's cute." Not how I imagined meeting him though. That was it. No sorry. No guilt. No awe. Just irritation that he'd missed his photo op moment. My jaw clenched. My arms curled tighter around my son. And I said, slowly, "You missed it because you chose to." He rolled his eyes and muttered, "Jesus, Claire, it's just 9 holes, 9 holes. 9. While I was bleeding through my pants and screaming on asphalt. That night, I asked the nurses to ban him from the room. They were more than willing. The charge nurse said quietly, "You're not the first woman who had to be stronger than her partner." And she handed me the hospital's legal advocate number. I didn't even hesitate. Within 24 hours, I had filed an emergency custody petition. Within 72, I had met with a lawyer. Within a week, we were in court. Mason came prepared with a smile, a tan, and a very expensive attorney. I came with a USB drive, a sworn statement from Margaret, my hospital chart, and 6 unanswered texts begging him to come. His lawyer tried to spin it, said Mason was misled about the urgency. That no harm had come to the child, so no real damage had been done. The judge, a woman in her 50s with iron gray hair and eyes like steel, leaned forward and said, "Mr. Walters, you left your wife in active labor on a public highway. You didn't miss the birth. You abandoned it." I was granted full custody. Mason was given visitation only under supervised conditions. And he walked out of that courtroom like a sulking teenager, not a man who had just lost access to his own child. He never once asked me how I felt giving birth in a Ford with a stranger. Never once asked what our son weighed, what his name meant, or how long I was in pain. Instead, he told people I was a vindictive ex who ruined his family. What he didn't know, what no one did, was that I was planning to legally change our son's last name. That Mason Walters would never be on the birth certificate. That my child would grow up with no memory of the man who left us behind for a stupid ball and a patch of grass. And the cruelest twist? The only time Mason ever came close to real remorse was when he couldn't have more children. But that twist, is a chapter of its own. And trust me, it's coming. I was cutting apples in the kitchen, humming to myself while my son, Eli, chased our golden retriever around the living room in his dinosaur pajamas. It had been 4 years since that highway birth, and I had built something quiet and safe for us. No golf trophies on the shelves. No silences that reeked of resentment. Just me, Eli, and peace. So when the knock came at the door that morning, 3 sharp raps that didn't feel like a neighbor or a delivery, I paused. I wiped my hands, peeked through the blinds, and my breath caught. Mason. Older. Paler. He wore a dress shirt with sleeves rolled to the elbows like he was trying to seem casual, but I saw the desperation hanging off him like a soaked coat. I opened the door an inch. Not wide enough to let him in. Just enough to show I wasn't afraid. Claire, he breathed, eyes scanning behind me like he was hoping to catch a glimpse of Eli. Can we talk? You have 3 minutes, I said. Not because I was timing him, but because I knew he'd crumble fast. And I was right. He held out a small envelope. It shook in his hands. Elise and I, we've been trying. For years. IVF. Hormone therapy. Surrogates. Nothing worked. His voice cracked and he looked away. They told us it's me. Low count. Low motility. Practically zero. I said nothing. So, he continued, Eli, he's my only child. My only legacy. I've made mistakes. I know. But I was young. Selfish. I didn't understand, you understood, I snapped. You understood that I was in labor. You understood the baby was coming. And you chose to swing a club instead of holding my hand. He looked down, ashamed. Finally. You're right. But I want to fix it. Please. Just let me see him. Once a month. A letter. A picture. Anything. He's my blood. I could feel my heart pounding. Not from old feelings, those were long dead, but from the audacity. The sheer gall of this man thinking biology gave him a pass. I took the envelope from his hand. Inside was a printed letter, a request to amend the birth certificate. To add his name. For inheritance purposes, it said. I almost laughed. You're not asking for Eli, I whispered. You're asking for a name on a form. You're asking to own what you abandoned. He stammered, no, I stepped closer. You're not his father. A father shows up. A father holds a child's hand when he's scared, reads him stories when he's sick, kisses scraped knees and goes to school plays even when he's tired. A father doesn't make a woman deliver life alone on a highway. He was crying now. For real. I think that was the first time I'd seen him cry and not believe it was for show. But I didn't soften. Eli doesn't know your name, Mason. And I don't say that to hurt you. I say it because I chose it that way. And I won't undo that choice now that your new life has crumbled. He tried to protest, but I shut the door. Not with a slam. With a quiet, deliberate click. Because closure isn't always loud. Sometimes, it's a whisper through the wood that says, you don't live here anymore. And as I watched him walk back to his car, broken and alone, I realized his silence wasn't punishment. It was parenting. 2 days after Mason showed up on my doorstep, I received a letter in the mail. Not from him, he knew better now, but from his lawyer. I opened it with the kind of numb curiosity you develop when you've been burned enough times that even fire feels familiar. Inside was a formal request to pursue legal paternity rights. He was trying to petition the court to claim Eli. Claim. Like a suitcase at baggage claim. Like a golf trophy he left behind in the rain and suddenly remembered after the shelf felt empty. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I walked over to Eli, who was sitting cross-legged on the floor, building a tower out of blocks. I sat next to him and asked, what would you do if someone tried to steal your tallest tower? He looked at me with those same eyes that had blinked up at me on that highway years ago, deep brown, impossibly serious for his age. I'd build it higher, he said. I smiled. Good. That's what we'll do. And that's exactly what I did. I met with my lawyer, Olivia, sharp as a whip and calm as a glacier. I showed her the birth footage. The medical records. The court transcripts from the original custody case. And then, as a final nail, I gave her the letter Mason had sent me just days before, the one where he admitted that Eli was his only legacy. Olivia looked up after reading it and said, he's not trying to be a father. He's trying to fill a void. Exactly. The hearing was set 2 months later. Mason arrived with a woman I didn't recognize. It wasn't Elise. It was someone younger, with a sympathetic smile and her hand wrapped tightly around Mason's arm, like she was there to support a man wronged by fate. I didn't blink. I had nothing to prove. He did. The judge this time was a man. Mid-60s. Gray beard. Calm eyes. He opened the session by stating clearly, "We are not here to determine DNA. We are here to determine parenthood." Mason's lawyer argued that every child has a right to know their biological father. That withholding that relationship was harmful. That Mason had changed. That Elise's infertility had opened his eyes. I sat quietly, never interrupting. But when it was my turn to speak, I stood up, not with fire, but with truth. "Your Honor," I began, "my son knows love. He knows security. He knows what it means to be someone's whole world. He has never known a moment where he was someone's afterthought. Mason isn't here because he found God or fatherhood, he's here because he lost a future he thought he was owed. And now he wants to rewrite history with paperwork." The judge looked at me. "And if the court orders visitation?" I took a deep breath. "Then I'll explain to my son that sometimes, adults make choices with consequences. And one of those consequences is that he'll sit in a cold room once a month with a man who watched his birth secondhand while finishing a golf game." There was silence. The kind that hums like electricity just before lightning strikes. Then came the verdict, motion denied. Mason would remain a biological footnote. Nothing more. Outside the courtroom, he followed me to the curb, eyes glassy, voice low. "You're going to make him hate me." I turned slowly. "I don't have to." Then I got into my car and drove home to my son, the one who laughed when I burned pancakes, who hugged my leg while brushing his teeth, who didn't need another legacy because he was already mine. And when he asked me that night why I looked tired, I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Because I built the tallest tower today, baby. And I didn't let anyone knock it down." I didn't plan to hear from Elise again. Not after the first time, when I'd sent her the dashcam footage and left her face ghost white in my inbox, too stunned to reply. But 3 weeks after the court hearing, she sent me a voice message. Not a text. Not a call. A shaky, breathy voice note, just 30 seconds long, but enough to shift everything. "Claire. I didn't know. About the birth. About the court case." I believed him. "He told me you ran away with Eli and poisoned your son against him. He said you were cold and bitter and vindictive. But now I've seen the footage. And I'm so sorry. I never should have asked you to let him see Eli. If there's ever anything I can do to make it right, I'll do it." For a moment, I sat frozen on the edge of my bed. Not because I felt victorious, but because that voice didn't sound like the smug woman I imagined from Mason's photos. It sounded like me. 5 years ago. Before the pain. Before the betrayal. Just another woman duped by his charm and his lies. Another woman caught in his orbit. I waited a few days. Then replied. I told her the whole story, the contractions, the birth, the roadside blood, the courtroom lies. I didn't sugarcoat it, but I didn't spit venom either. I just gave her the truth, the kind she had a right to know. And days later, I got another surprise. Elise left him. She sent me a final message. I packed my bags. I left the key. I told him I couldn't respect a man who abandoned his child at the very start. He told me I'd regret it. I said I already regretted marrying someone who treated fatherhood like a second chance at legacy instead of a first chance at love. Her message ended with one final note. I don't want anything from you, Claire. I just want you to know. I believe you. And I believe in Eli having the kind of life you gave him. I'll never intrude again. I sat there for a long time after that. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't just a mother fighting off threats, I was a woman who had finally been believed. And the one who believed me was the same woman who once stood in the space I used to fill beside Mason. That irony wasn't lost on me. But that's when I realized something even deeper. All these years, I thought this was a story about a man who failed me. But really, it was a story about how many women he failed. And how we survived him in different ways. Eli never asked about Elise. He never remembered her. And he certainly never spoke of Mason. The only man he called Dad was my brother, Noah, who taught him to ride a bike and clapped the loudest at his first school play. The man who never missed a birthday. Never once said, 9 more holes. Because real fathers don't count holes. They show up and fill them. And Mason? Mason was nothing but the gap we climbed over and left behind. Eli's 7th birthday was coming up. We were planning a small party, balloons, backyard games, his favorite chocolate cake with marshmallow frosting. He wanted a dinosaur theme. Easy. I was halfway through hanging little cardboard velociraptors from the ceiling when I got the notification. New friend request, Mason Walters. Not on Facebook. On Eli's school app. You see, our district used a digital portal for parents to see homework, grades, class photos, and birthday reminders. A system meant to bring families closer. But somehow, Mason had slipped through the cracks, added himself as a secondary guardian, even though I had locked down the account years ago. I felt cold all over. It wasn't just a request, it was a move. A calculated, strategic step to inch himself back into Eli's world. Without court approval. Without my knowledge. I messaged the school immediately. They apologized, claimed it was a technical error, and revoked his access within hours. But the damage wasn't in the access, it was in the intent. Mason had found a new way to push. A new backdoor. And it made me realize, this wasn't over. That night, I told Eli we were going to have a special rule moving forward. That anyone who wanted to contact him, email, message, anything, had to go through me first. I framed it like a secret agent mission, and he giggled, pretending to hold a walkie-talkie as he whispered, "Copy that, Mom." Security protocol activated. But inside, I was shaking. The next day, I received flowers. Left on my porch. No card. But I recognized the florist's name. Mason had used it once before, back when we were still married, after a fight about him skipping my OB appointment to go to a charity poker night. The message was silent, but the intent screamed, "I'm still watching. Still reaching." I didn't call him. I didn't respond. Instead, I made a different kind of call. To a reporter I knew from the local paper, a woman named Juliet who once covered a story I worked on during my nurse training. She owed me a favor. I told her everything. Not with bitterness, but with documentation. Dashcam footage. Court transcripts. Messages. Emails. School records. I wasn't trying to destroy Mason. I was trying to create a wall so high, so public, that he couldn't climb it again. And the article? It went viral in our town. Highway birth, absent father, one woman's fight for safety and custody. I didn't use his full name. But everyone who knew us, knew. And Mason? He got the message. Because 2 days after that piece went live, he sent me a final message, no words. Just a single photo of the empty golf course. The same one he played on the day I gave birth. The caption read, "Sold my membership." It wasn't an apology. It was a quiet surrender. And honestly, that was better than an apology. Because it meant that for once, he knew he'd lost. 3 months passed. The air turned crisp. Eli lost his first tooth and was convinced the tooth fairy must have ridden in on a dinosaur because there were muddy prints outside his window, prints Noah made with an old plastic stegosaurus just to make him smile. Life had found its rhythm again. Quiet mornings. School drop-offs. Laughter that didn't echo against any ache. Until the letter arrived. It wasn't in an envelope. Just a folded piece of stationery, slid under my front door like some back alley confession. No stamp. No return address. But the handwriting, I recognized it immediately. Slanted, rushed, like he never slowed down long enough to care how his words landed. It was from Mason. But it wasn't to me. It was addressed to the son I'll never know. I stood in the kitchen and read it alone, letting each word pour into me like boiling water I refused to drop. It started like a script. I'm sorry, I wasn't ready, I didn't understand. But about halfway through, something shifted. He wasn't writing to gain sympathy. He was writing because he finally believed he didn't deserve it. Your mom was braver than I ever gave her credit for. Stronger. Smarter. I mocked her pain because I didn't want to feel my own. I missed your birth not just because of golf, but because I thought fatherhood was something you stepped into when it was convenient. She knew it was something you bled for. And then the final paragraph, you're better off not knowing me. I know that now. I thought I wanted a son. I just didn't want the weight of being a father. So I gave that weight to your mother. She carried it. Every day. And if you ever read this, just know she gave you the world. I gave you nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't even tremble. I just folded it carefully, tucked it into the back of Eli's memory box, the one he wouldn't open until he was old enough to understand what love looks like in its absence. And then I did something unexpected. I wrote a reply. Not to Mason. To Elise. I told her I received the letter. That Mason had finally done something right, not by me, but by Eli. I told her that if she ever wanted to meet Eli one day, as herself, not as a stepmother or intruder, but simply as a woman who once believed a lie and walked away from it, I wouldn't say no. Because forgiveness isn't always about who hurt you. Sometimes, it's about giving your child the peace of knowing not everyone stayed broken. And sometimes, it's realizing you didn't either. It was a Saturday, quiet, breezy, the kind of day that makes everything feel lighter than it should. Eli was chasing ducks near the pond while I sipped lukewarm coffee on a bench under the willow tree. That park had become our safe place. Our tradition. After the article, the court, the letters, it was where we could exist without past shadows brushing too close. But that day, the shadow showed up again. A woman sat down at the far end of the bench. I didn't notice her at first. She was bundled in a rust-colored coat, sunglasses shielding her face even though the sun was modest. But something about the way she turned her head, it hit me. Elise? She took the glasses off slowly. Claire, she said softly, not like a threat or a challenge, but like a woman remembering how to speak after silence. I didn't move. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I know I said I'd never intrude. I didn't come to see him. I saw him running. The way he laughs. He's so free. I looked at Eli, who was pretending to be a T-Rex now, arms tucked in, roaring at the ducks. He's happy, I said flatly. He should be, she replied. You made him that way. There was a long pause. She opened her purse and pulled out a small envelope. This isn't from Mason. It's from me. It's not for Eli. It's for you. I hesitated, then took it. Inside was a check, voided, torn in half, and a handwritten note. This is the check Mason tried to give me after the custody hearing. He said if I helped him craft a new image, I could use this to start the family we couldn't have. I tore it up. I didn't want to buy a child. I wanted to be one of the women who didn't sell out to comfort. I think you're one of them, too. Thank you for not hating me. You had every right to. I looked up at her. She didn't cry. But her face held that exhausted kind of sadness. The kind that doesn't scream anymore. It just waits to be dismissed. I never hated you, I said. I hated who I became trying to forgive him. You reminded me that I could forgive myself instead. She blinked, nodded, and stood. I won't come again, she said. But I just wanted to tell you what you built here. It's not just a home. It's a miracle. And then, quietly, she walked away. Eli came running back moments later, dirt on his knees, holding a rock he swore was a fossil. He climbed into my lap, babbling about dinosaur eggs and secret treasure buried under the slide. I held him close, my chin on his head, and whispered, "You already are the treasure, baby. Everything else is just noise." And in that moment, with the wind rustling through the leaves and Elise's footsteps fading behind me, I realized, even ghosts eventually give up when they realize they can't haunt a home that's full of light. It started like any other bedtime. Pajamas, teeth brushed, nightlight glowing in its soft amber hue. Eli was already under the covers with his favorite book, Where the Dinosaurs Sleep. We read it every night. Same silly voices. Same roar when the T-Rex snored too loudly. But just as I kissed his forehead and tucked the blanket around him, he looked at me with those two wise eyes and asked, Mom, why don't I have a dad?" There it was. The question I'd rehearsed in my mind 1,000 different ways, hoping I'd never have to answer. I sat down beside him slowly, the mattress dipping with the weight of the moment. "What made you ask that?" I said gently, brushing a curl away from his forehead. "Other kids at school," he whispered. "They were making cards for Father's Day. Miss Carter said we could make one for anyone who takes care of us. I made mine for Uncle Noah. But then Jonah said I must not have a real dad. Is that true?" I felt my throat close. Not because of the truth, but because of how much of it I couldn't say. I took a deep breath and held his tiny hand in mine. "Sweetheart," I said, "a dad isn't just someone who helps make you. A dad is someone who stays. Someone who shows up. Someone who listens and hugs and cheers and never lets you feel alone. And by that definition, you don't have a dad." His face scrunched in confusion. "But you do have family. You have Uncle Noah, who taught you how to ride a bike. You have Grandpa Pete, who sends you dinosaur books from Montana. You have me, and I love you harder than the sun loves the sky." He was quiet for a moment, staring at the ceiling like the answers might be written in the stars painted above his bed. "But, where is my real dad?" I told the truth. The truth he needed. "He's someone I knew a long time ago. But he wasn't ready to be a parent. He made choices that hurt me, and would have hurt you, too. So I made a choice, to keep you safe. That's what love is. Not always staying, but sometimes, walking away from what's wrong." Eli nodded slowly. "Does he know me?" I swallowed. "He knows of you. But you don't know him because you haven't missed anything. Everything good and brave and strong about you? That came from you. You're not missing a piece, baby. You are the piece that was missing from my life." His little hand gripped mine tighter. "Okay," he said simply. And that was it. He didn't cry. He didn't ask again. He just turned on his side and drifted off, clutching his stuffed dinosaur. I sat in that room for a long time, listening to his breathing and wondering how many more versions of this conversation I'd have to face as he grew. But one thing was clear, he didn't need a father. He needed truth. And that night, I gave it to him, wrapped in love, anchored in safety. And I promised myself, if the question ever came again, I wouldn't flinch. Because silence might protect you for a while. But truth sets your child free. Parent-teacher nights were supposed to be easy now. Familiar. Eli's second-grade teacher, Ms. Ramirez, loved him. Said he had a curious mind and a kind heart, always the first to help a classmate who dropped their books or got nervous before a spelling test. He'd drawn a picture of her once riding a triceratops and she'd taped it to the front of her desk. That night, I wore a soft green sweater and brought chocolate chip muffins, just like always. I had no idea the past was waiting in the hallway. I was signing in near the front office when I saw him. Mason. Standing at the other end of the corridor. He wasn't in disguise. He wasn't hiding. He looked straight at me, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. Sunflowers. My favorite, something he never remembered when we were married. And now here he was, holding them like they could rewrite 7 years of silence. I walked straight toward him. Calm. Cold. Steady. You are not allowed here, I said, voice low. You have no guardianship, no visitation rights, and no legal permission to show up at his school. I'm not here to see him, he said quickly, as darting toward the classroom doors. I'm here to talk to you. I stepped in closer. You made your statements. The court listened. I listened. And you lost. He held out the flowers, ridiculous in their cheerfulness. Just hear me out. No. Claire, please, I said no. By now, a few parents were watching. A school counselor I recognized from field day was pretending not to eavesdrop. So I took the flowers from Mason's hand, then dropped them directly into the trash can next to the water fountain. I have a son to raise, I said. And a future to build. You don't get to haunt that just because your guilt caught up. He looked like he wanted to say more. But I turned my back on him and walked into Eli's classroom. Ms. Ramirez greeted me with a smile and showed me his artwork, drawings of volcanoes, outer space, and one that made my throat tighten, a picture of me holding his hand, with the words "My Hero" written in blocky crayon letters at the top. I sat down at his tiny desk, listening to Ms. Ramirez describe how Eli had helped a new student from Brazil feel welcome by teaching him the word for dinosaur in English and roaring until they both laughed. And all the while, I could feel the weight of that hallway moment pressing behind me like a shadow I refused to let in. Mason was gone by the time I left. But not before I saw the custodian pulling the sunflowers out of the trash, shaking his head, and muttering, "Some people think they can fix years with petals." He was right. You don't fix absence with gifts. You fix it with presents. And Mason had long run out of chances. It was a Wednesday morning. Rain clung to the windows, slow and persistent, the kind of rain that makes everything feel like it's holding its breath. I was folding Eli's socks, tiny, mismatched, some with dinosaurs, some with holes, when the call came through. Unknown number. I usually let those ring out, but something told me to answer. "Ms. Walters," the voice asked. "Yes. This is Judge Henley's office. We need to notify you of a petition filed regarding your son Eli. You've been named in a hearing for the review of parental rights by Mr. Mason Walters." I felt the color drain from my face. Mason what? He's filed a motion. It seems he's claiming reformation, citing counseling, community service, character witnesses. He's requesting limited visitation, supervised, as a pathway toward gradual reintegration. Reintegration. The word rang in my ears like a gavel slamming against my peace. I thanked her. Got the date. Hung up. And sat down on the edge of the couch, staring into nothing. He was coming again. But this time, not with flowers or letters or empty apologies. He was coming with lawyers. With paperwork. With another attempt to wear me down. I called Olivia, my lawyer. Told her everything. "He won't win," she said. "But we'll treat it like he might. Because your calm is Eli's shield." And that's exactly what I did. We gathered everything, again. The dashcam. The old transcripts. Witness statements. The school's report from the night he showed up at parent-teacher night. And Elise, God bless her, agreed to testify. "He hasn't changed," she told Olivia on a recorded affidavit. "He's just gotten better at pretending." The day of the hearing, I wore the same green sweater I wore the night I threw his flowers in the trash. Not for sentiment. For power. For memory. Mason walked in with a lawyer, a haircut, and a practiced look of repentance. He spoke with trembling lips, saying all the right things, that he'd found faith, that he regretted everything, that no man should be barred from knowing his own son. Then it was my turn. I didn't bring drama. I brought reality. I am not keeping my son from his father, I said clearly. I'm keeping my son from being hurt again. Mason missed Eli's birth because he was on a golf course. He missed his first tooth because he didn't know what school he went to. He missed every scraped knee, every nightmare, every birthday candle. And now that he's older, smarter, and beautifully whole, now Mason wants access? No. My son is not a project. He's a person. And you don't get to re-enter someone's life just because you've cleaned your shoes. The judge didn't even ask questions. Ruling was swift. Petition denied. Again. This time, with a final warning: any further harassment or manipulation of school systems or digital platforms would result in a permanent restraining order. Mason didn't speak. Just stood there, blinking fast, the shame finally pooling beneath his performance. As I walked past him in the hallway, I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I simply said, Eli has a father. His name is Noah. And you are not him. And then I walked back into the rain, soaked and steady, knowing that no courtroom, no plea, and no bouquet would ever buy him a place in the world I built. Because I wasn't just defending my son. I was defending every woman who's ever had to fight twice as hard because someone showed up too late and still demanded the title. It was just past 9. Eli was supposed to be asleep, but the soft rustle of papers coming from his room told me otherwise. I tiptoed down the hallway and peeked in, not to scold, just to check. There he was, cross-legged on his bed, scribbling something with his favorite glittery blue pen, the one he only used for important thoughts. I leaned in the doorway and said softly, "Writing your next dinosaur comic?" He jumped a little, then smiled guiltily. Not this time. I walked in and sat beside him. What is it then? He hesitated, then handed me the paper. It wasn't a drawing. It was a letter. Dear Dad, I don't know what to call you because I don't know you. But I know about you. I know you didn't come when I was born. I know you didn't stay when Mom was scared. I know you tried to come back, but I don't remember you, and I don't really want to. Mom says people make mistakes. She also says some people never say sorry. But you did. I heard about it. And I don't hate you. I just love the people who stayed more. I have a really good life. I don't need fixing. I'm okay without you. So please don't be sad. Just leave me where I'm happy. From Eli. I didn't cry. Not in front of him. I just wrapped my arms around him and held him like the wind might try to take him from me if I let go. He pulled back after a few moments and looked at me with a small, unsure smile. Was it mean? No, I whispered. It was brave. Do you think I should send it? I thought carefully. No. I think you wrote it for you. Not for him. Some letters don't need to be mailed. Some truths just need to be said out loud, even if no one's listening. He folded it neatly and placed it inside a shoebox under his bed, his secret vault of thoughts and inventions and feelings too big for words. Then he looked at me and asked, "Will I ever have to see him?" "No," I said. "Not unless you want to." "Good," he said, lying back down. Because I don't think he deserves to see how awesome I turned out. That made me smile, even as my throat tightened. Because he was right. He had turned out awesome. And the man who missed it all, who missed the bloody beginning and tried to barge back into the middle, didn't deserve the ending. Not the hugs. Not the graduations. Not the dinosaur comics or the math medals or the whispered bedtime secrets about crushes and fears and dreams. Those belong to us. Because while Mason chased his second chances, we were already living our first. And we were doing just fine. I never thought I'd hear his name trending. But there it was, blinking across my phone screen like a curse I never asked for. Former athlete turned life coach, Mason Walters, opens up about regrets in viral interview. Life coach. I clicked on the link. It led to a popular podcast, one of those glossy, high-production shows that turn trauma into content and redemption into brand deals. The episode title? From the golf course to redemption, how I lost my son before I met him. I didn't press play right away. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the screen. Eli was outside with Noah, flying a kite, his laughter floating in through the open window. The sound grounded me. Reminded me what was real. Then I listened. And at first, it was every cliché imaginable. Regret. Therapy. The man I was then isn't the man I am now. But then the host asked a question that made my stomach flip. Do you have a relationship with your son now? A pause. No. His mother, she's made it very hard. I paused the recording. It was instinct, the way my hands curled into fists. The way old wounds opened again like they had been waiting just under the skin. I sat frozen. Then I hit play again. I don't blame her. Not anymore. I missed the biggest moment of her life, of his life. I thought I had time. But when you're playing catch-up with a child who doesn't even know your face, time becomes a wall you can't climb. The host replied, so what would you say to him if you could? Mason exhaled, long and slow. I'd say I'm sorry. Not just for missing the moment, but for making his mother carry it alone. I think, maybe the most honest thing I can do for my son now is to stay gone. To not break the world he already knows. I sat there, stunned. Because for once, he got it. Not perfectly. Not heroically. But truly. And after years of fights, filings, and flowers tossed in trash cans, this was the first time I felt something unexpected, peace. That night, I didn't tell Eli about the podcast. He didn't need to hear his story used as a soundbite. But I did text Elise. Just 5 words, he finally told the truth. She replied, I heard. I cried. For the first time in years, I didn't feel hunted or cornered or bracing for his next move. I felt like maybe, just maybe, Mason had finally chosen the one act of parenting he'd never tried before, letting go. And in that space he left behind, I looked at my son, laughing in the backyard, his kite soaring above the trees, and whispered, you're free now. So am I. It was field day at Eli's school, the sun was bright, the grass was trampled flat by running feet, and parents stood around in sunglasses and lawn chairs, sipping lukewarm coffee while cheering for sack races and 3-legged relays. Noah came, of course. He always did. Wore Eli's team color. Painted a stripe on his cheek like the other dads. Carried juice boxes like a war veteran of school events. Eli beamed every time he glanced over at us as me and Noah. He waved when he won his event. Waved again when he tripped and scraped his knee and I rushed forward with a band-aid that had dinosaurs on it. But just before the final race, I noticed Eli whispering to his teacher. She nodded and handed him the mic. Hi, he said, voice crackling through the school's old speaker. This last race is for the championship. And I just wanted to say thanks to my team, my class, and also, my mom. She's here every year. And also Uncle Noah, who's kind of like the bonus dad I got because life is weird but awesome. The parents chuckled. Noah's eyes went glassy. My heart tightened. Eli continued. Someone once asked me who my dad was. And I said, I don't have one. But actually, I do. I have 2 people who show up. Who cheer. Who make pancakes. And even if one of them didn't help make me, he helped raise me. And that's more important. And just like that, the mic cut out as the PE teacher waved him toward the starting line. The race began. Eli didn't win. He came third. But that day, he won something much bigger. Later that night, we were cleaning up grass stains from his jeans and emptying crumbs from his backpack when he asked, "Do you think the real dad ever hears about me?" I hesitated. Maybe. Do you think he'd be proud? I looked him in the eye. I think he'd wish he deserved to be. He nodded like that made perfect sense. Then he grabbed his plastic medal from his race, clipped it onto the fridge next to a picture of me and Noah from last Christmas, and said, "This is the winning wall. No losers allowed." He didn't mean it cruelly. He meant it clearly. And in that moment, I understood something even deeper than the custody battles, the letters, the podcast, or the courtroom speeches. Eli wasn't just surviving his father's absence. He was thriving in the presence of those who never left. And no DNA test, no legal petition, no viral redemption arc could ever compete with that kind of love. We weren't a broken family. We were an intentional one. Built on choice, not chance. On effort, not excuse. And that was something no man could ever petition to take. It was nearly midnight. Eli had finally fallen asleep after a long day of school, homework, and his latest obsession, designing a board game called Dino Rescue, complete with hand-drawn cards and a volcano dice tower. I was halfway through folding laundry when my phone buzzed. Subject: request for guidance, regret and redemption from Mason. Walters@gmail.com to Elise. Brighton at Wellness Group. Org CC, accidentally, me. I don't think he meant to copy me. But he did. And so, once again, I found myself staring at words from a man who'd once left me to bleed alone on a highway shoulder while he swung a 9-iron in the sun. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't a threat. It was raw. I know I've done damage I can never undo. I know Claire will never forgive me. I don't even expect Eli to. But I don't want to be remembered only by what I didn't do. I want to help someone, even if it's not my own child. I've started speaking to teen dads at the shelter, the ones who think parenting is optional. I tell them my story. Not to preach, just to confess. I tell them about the golf game. The highway. The silence. I tell them that if you wait too long to show up, you lose the right to knock. Elise, you once told me redemption wasn't about grand gestures, it was about doing good where no one claps. I'm trying. And, if Claire ever hears about this, tell her I'm not asking for another chance. I just hope my son never ends up like I was. I sat there frozen. Not because I was angry. But because it was the first time Mason's words didn't come wrapped in manipulation. They came from a place I never expected, accountability. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it to anyone. I didn't mention it to Eli. But I printed it. And folded it carefully. And placed it inside the very same shoebox where Eli had put his unsent letter months earlier. Not because I thought he needed to read it now. But because maybe, someday, when he's old enough to see gray between the black and white, when he's ready to ask not just what happened but why, he'll read both. 2 letters. One from a boy too wise for his years. One from a man who got wise too late. And maybe then, Eli will understand that sometimes closure doesn't come with courtroom victories or public apologies. Sometimes, it comes when you choose to end the story before someone else rewrites it. And I had ended ours. Not with hate. Not even with anger anymore. Just a silence that no longer needed to defend itself. It happened on a quiet Sunday at the community center. Eli had been invited to a science club workshop, something about solar systems and marshmallow constellations. Noah and I decided to wait in the back while the kids got their hands sticky with glue and space facts. It was just supposed to be another fun afternoon. But fate, as always, had its own agenda. There was a boy about Eli's age. Quiet. Reserved. Watching the others laugh but not quite joining in. His name tag said Micah. I noticed Eli inch closer to him. They started talking. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the comfort blooming in Micah's shoulders, the slow smile stretching across his face. Eli had that effect on people. After the session, as we helped clean up, Micah's guardian came to introduce herself. Her name was Lenora, an older woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked braids. Your son is amazing, she said. He made Micah feel like he belonged. That's rare for him. He's been through, well, a lot. I nodded, smiling. He has a gift for finding people who feel a little left out. He told Micah something, Lenora added, lowering her voice. Something about how not having a dad doesn't make you any less. That you can still be a superhero if you've got love around you. My breath caught. That was something I had told him once, on a day he asked why his birthday cake only had one parent lighting the candles. That sounds like him, I whispered. Lenora smiled, but there was something glassy in her eyes. Micah's father left when he was 2. No goodbyes. No explanation. Just vanished. His mom passed last year. It's been hard. I looked over and saw Eli handing Micah a crumpled drawing, 2 dinosaurs with capes, flying above a volcano, saving the world. He had written Micah plus Eli equals hero team in shaky pencil underneath. It hit me then, not just pride, but something deeper. Eli wasn't just surviving without a father. He was becoming the kind of boy who helped others survive it too. That night, as we drove home, Eli asked, "Do you think Micah will be okay?" "Yes," I said. "Because he met you." He thought for a moment. "You think maybe one day I could help other kids like that? Like in real life?" "You already are," I said. "But yes, I think you'll help a lot more." He smiled, looked out the window, and whispered, "Maybe I don't need to ask about him anymore. I think I know everything I need to know." And just like that, a chapter closed. Not with slamming doors or courtroom rulings, but with crayons and capes and a boy named Micah, who reminded my son that healing isn't always about looking back. Sometimes, it's about reaching forward and taking someone else's hand. And in that moment, I knew Mason had given Eli nothing. But Eli, he had already turned that into everything. It was after midnight, and the house was silent, the kind of silence that only comes when your child is safe in bed, your to-do list is finally empty, and your heart isn't screaming for once. I was brushing my teeth, half asleep, when I caught my reflection in the mirror. Not just my face. My eyes. They looked different. Not tired. Not broken. Lighter. I set the toothbrush down and just stared. The woman looking back at me wasn't the one who once screamed into the steering wheel during contractions while her husband missed her calls. She wasn't the one who sat in courtrooms clutching evidence of abandonment. She wasn't the one who wrote out speech after speech trying to convince a judge, a lawyer, a ghost of a man that her child was worth showing up for. No. She was someone else now. She was me. I touched the scar on my stomach, my body's souvenir from a birth story most people wouldn't believe if they didn't see the footage. And then I whispered something I hadn't said out loud before, "You did it." Not to Eli. To myself. "You did it, Claire. You made a home without a partner. You raised a boy without rage in his bones. You chose love over legacy. And you never, not once, let him feel like he was missing something." I felt tears, but they weren't sharp this time. They were warm. Gentle. Because that was the night I realized, the story wasn't about Mason anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. He was the beginning, but not the plot. The plot was me learning how to be mother and father and fortress all at once. The plot was watching Eli grow into a boy who didn't flinch when someone said the word dad, he just tilted his head, like it was a foreign language he didn't speak, and moved on with his life. The plot was about how I stopped measuring my value by who walked away, and started honoring the woman who stayed. Me. I smiled into the mirror and said it again. Louder this time. You did it. Then I walked out of the bathroom, checked on Eli one last time, and slid into bed beside the dog he'd somehow convinced me to adopt. His little legs twitched in a dream, probably chasing more dinosaurs or dragons or whatever new species he'd invented that week. And as I lay there listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing, I knew one thing for sure: we weren't healing anymore. We were healed. And Mason? He was just the prologue. Our story had already moved on. It came in a cream-colored envelope. No return address. No stamp. Just my name, handwritten in a looping script I didn't recognize. I almost didn't open it. Bills, birthday invites, catalog junk, that was what the mail usually held. But this? This felt different. Heavy. Deliberate. Inside was a single page. Letterhead from Sunview Shelter for Young Fathers. At the top, a gold emblem of an open hand holding a seedling. Below it, the words, "To Claire Walters, from someone who owes you more than you'll ever know." I read slowly. You don't know me. But I know your story. All of us here do. Every Tuesday night, a man named Mason sits in a folding chair in our basement room and tells us about the worst day of his life. He doesn't cry. He doesn't beg for pity. He just talks. About a woman giving birth alone on the side of a highway. About a boy he'll never tuck in or teach to shave. About how 9 more holes became the sentence that cost him everything. At first, we hated him. Honestly, some of us still do. But he keeps coming. Week after week. He brings pizza. He cleans up afterward. He shows up, on time, every time. And here's the strange part: because of him, a few of us have started showing up for our kids. One of the guys said something last week that stuck with me. He said, maybe Mason was the warning we needed before we became the regret. I know this doesn't change anything for you. And I know it doesn't make up for the hurt he caused. But I wanted you to know, he didn't disappear. He didn't run. He stayed, and he's trying to turn his absence into a caution sign for the rest of us. Your pain became our lesson. And your son? He became our why. Thank you. A father who almost made the same mistake. I folded the letter slowly, like it was made of something sacred. For a long time, I just sat there, my fingers trembling slightly, my heart doing this quiet, disbelieving thud-thud in my chest. I didn't know whether to cry or smile. So I did both. Because for the first time, Mason's name came to me not with bitterness, but with impact. He hadn't come back to knock on our door. He'd gone to knock on others. And whether it was guilt, redemption, or just too late clarity that drove him, I didn't care anymore. He wasn't Eli's father. But maybe he was helping someone else become one. And that meant something. Not for me. Not even for Mason. But for every child out there waiting for someone to show up. And for every man standing at the edge of that choice. It was the end-of-year awards day at Eli's school. The gym was packed, parents fanning themselves with programs, teachers herding restless second graders into rows of foldable chairs, the air thick with excitement and the buzz of folding paper fans. I wore a pale blue dress Eli had once called my sky dress. He said when I wore it, I looked like the weather was always on my side. Noah sat next to me, tie slightly crooked, holding a bouquet of yellow daisies, Eli's favorite. Do you think he'll get the science award? He asked, teasing. I smiled. He told me he didn't care. But he also made a prediction chart about it with color-coded stars, so, yes. I think he hopes so. The principal took the stage and began announcing awards: Best Handwriting, Most Improved Reader, Kindest Classmate. And then came the one that stopped time for me, and the Compassion in Action Award goes to Eli Walters. I felt Noah squeeze my hand. The principal continued. Eli was nominated by 3 teachers, not for academics or attendance, but for kindness. For creating a friendship circle at recess for students who felt left out. For sharing his lunch with a boy who forgot his. For writing this note to his classmate Micah, who had lost his mother. You're not alone. I've had days that feel like missing pieces too. But sometimes, pieces find new friends. Like us. The room clapped. Noah's eyes welled. Mine already had. Eli walked across the stage, cheeks flushed, waving a little awkwardly. He took the certificate, looked out into the crowd, and locked eyes with me. He grinned. That big, whole-body grin that only kids who've been truly loved know how to give. Later, as we stood outside taking pictures, parents around us clapped their sons' shoulders and ruffled hair. One father said loudly, "Proud day for dads, huh?" I looked at Noah, who was tying Eli's shoelace with the same patience he once used to teach him how to ride a bike. I stepped forward and said, "Actually, proud day for the people who show up." The man blinked. Nodded. Said nothing more. That night, Eli hung the certificate on his wall next to his dinosaur posters. Then he did something he hadn't done before. He pulled the shoebox from under his bed. He took out the letter he had written months ago, the one to a father he never sent. And without a word, he tore it in half. Then into quarters. Then into pieces so small they floated like feathers into the waste bin. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. I thought I'd want to give it to him one day. But now I know, some people don't need to hear my story. They just need to not be in it. I kissed his forehead. That was brave. No, he said. That was freeing. And as I turned out the light, I knew Mason had finally been erased from the pages of our present. Not out of rage. Not even out of pain. But because he no longer belonged in the chapters we were writing. We were done writing about who left. We were busy celebrating who stayed. Before I give you the ending, I need to ask something. If this story touched you, if you've ever been left behind, or stood alone at a moment someone should have stood beside you, please like, share, and subscribe. And in the comments, tell me, where are you from? Because no matter where you're listening, I promise, someone out there needed to hear this just like you did. Now let me tell you how this all truly ended. Not with screaming. Not with a courtroom. But with a knock that never came. It was a full year after the awards ceremony. Eli was thriving, taller, louder, smarter, with opinions about everything from space travel to cereal brands. He still didn't ask about Mason. Not because I shut down the subject, but because his life was full without him. One Saturday morning, I got a letter from the shelter. Not handwritten. Official. Inside was a simple line: Mason Walters passed away peacefully in his sleep after a seizure. His last journal entry mentioned Eli. I sat in the quiet, letting that sentence fold itself into my bones. I wasn't devastated. I wasn't relieved. I was still. Later that day, when Eli was helping Noah rake leaves in the yard, I stood alone by the kitchen window watching them, my son and the man who never claimed the title father, but earned it every single day. And I made a choice. I didn't tell Eli. Not then. Because death didn't suddenly make Mason worthy. And the truth wasn't something I owed Eli, it was something I would offer only if he ever asked. But that night, as I stood beside Eli's bed while he slept, I whispered something I hadn't said before: you were never abandoned. You were chosen. Over and over and over again. And that was the truth. See, people love to tell stories about redemption. They love the arc where the one who walked away comes back and becomes a hero. But this story? This was about the woman who stayed. The boy who grew. The man who stepped in, not because he had to, but because he could. And about how, sometimes, the most powerful ending is the one where the door stays closed. And the life inside that door? Thrives anyway. Thank you for listening. This story wasn't just mine. It was for every mother who gave birth alone. Every child raised on love, not DNA. And every person who learned that the absence of someone can become the presence of peace. Please subscribe my channel, and before you go, tell me in the comments, where are you from? Let's remind each other how far strength can travel.